Imagine planning your only daughter's wedding for years, only to receive a text message 1 month before the big day. Mom, we've decided it's best if you don't come to the wedding. Your behavior is just too embarrassing, and we want this day to be perfect. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Those words from my daughter Olivia shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces. But what happened next? Well, let's just say sometimes rejection becomes the greatest gift you never knew you needed. This is the story of how being banned from my daughter's wedding led me to make headlines across America and find a part of myself I thought was long gone. I always thought I had a good relationship with my daughter. Not perfect, what mother-daughter relationship is, but good enough. My name is Donna Wilson, and for most of my 58 years, I've lived a pretty ordinary life in Lakeside, Michigan. I raised Olivia as a single mom after her father, Richard, left when she was just 4 years old. It wasn't easy, but we managed. I worked 2 jobs, days as an administrative assistant at the local high school and evenings waiting tables at Miller's Diner. It was exhausting, but Olivia never went without the things she needed. Olivia was always a determined child. From the moment she could walk, she had a clear vision of what she wanted and how things should be. As a toddler, she'd spend hours arranging her stuffed animals in perfect rows, each facing the exact same direction. In elementary school, she color-coded her folders and planned her outfits a week in advance. When she was 13, she started a vision board for her future wedding. That's just who Olivia was: organized, precise, and always striving for perfection. I was different. I laughed too loudly at movies. I wore bright floral prints when everyone else wore subdued colors. I sang along to songs in the grocery store. I'd strike up conversations with strangers in elevators. "Mom, please," Olivia would whisper, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. People are staring. People were always staring, according to Olivia. But I never noticed. I was just being myself, the same person I'd always been. Growing up in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business, I'd learned early on that life was too short to worry about what others thought. After Richard left, taking with him my sense of security and self-worth, I promised myself I'd never again dim my light for anyone. If that meant being a little louder, a little more colorful, a little more out there than other moms, so be it. As Olivia moved through her teenage years, the gap between us widened. She gravitated toward the popular crowd, girls with straight hair and designer clothes, whose mothers hosted Pinterest-perfect dinner parties and chaired the PTA. I tried my best to fit into this world for her sake. I bought a sensible cardigan for parent-teacher conferences. I toned down my laugh at school functions. I even attempted to bake those complicated French macarons for her 16th birthday, though they turned out looking more like colorful hockey pucks. By the time Olivia left for college at Northwestern University, a school she chose partly, I suspect because it was 4 hours away from home, we had settled into a familiar pattern. She would call once a week, tell me about her classes, and inevitably end with some gentle criticism. "Mom, please don't send me any more care packages with those homemade cookies. My roommates think they're weird." Or, "Mom, when you visit for parents' weekend, maybe don't wear that rainbow sweater. Everyone else's parents dress so normal." I always laughed it off, told her I loved her, and carried on being myself. What else could I do? When Olivia met Blake Thompson during her senior year, I was hopeful. He seemed kind, ambitious, and he actually laughed at my jokes when I first met him over Thanksgiving break. He was studying law, came from a wealthy family, in Connecticut, and had the kind of polished manners that suggested private schools and summer sailing lessons. He wasn't exactly what I'd pictured for my daughter, but he made her happy, and that was all that mattered. The proposal came 2 years after graduation on a weekend trip to New York City. Blake had arranged for a horse-drawn carriage ride through Central Park, complete with a photographer hidden in the bushes to capture the moment. Olivia called me that evening, her voice breathless with excitement. "Mom!" "It happened," Blake proposed, and it was perfect. "The ring is 3 carats. 3 carats, Mom. And we're thinking of a June wedding next year at the Thompson family estate in Greenwich." My heart swelled with happiness for her, even as a small voice inside me wondered if I would fit into this picture-perfect wedding at a Connecticut state. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm so happy for you both. Just tell me what you need me to do." What followed were months of increasingly tense phone calls and visits. Olivia and Blake's wedding wasn't going to be just any wedding. It was going to be featured in a regional bridal magazine. Blake's mother, Eleanor Thompson, was connected to the editor, and she had arranged for a 6-page spread showcasing what she called the society wedding of the season. Eleanor Thompson was everything I wasn't: restrained, elegant, and meticulously groomed. She wore pearl earrings and cashmere twin sets. Her silver hair was always styled in a smooth bob that didn't move, even in the wind. When we first met at the engagement dinner, she looked me up and down, taking in my turquoise dress and chunky handmade jewelry, and said, "How interesting. Olivia never mentioned you were so creative." From that moment on, I felt like I was auditioning for a role in my daughter's wedding and consistently failing to get the part. Every suggestion I made was gently but firmly rejected. The Italian caterer I'd found who made amazing cannoli? "Too ethnic," Eleanor said. "We've already secured Pierre from the Greenwich Country Club." The local jazz quartet I thought would be perfect for the cocktail hour? "We've booked a string quartet that played at the governor's daughter's wedding." Even my offer to make Olivia's favorite childhood cookies for the dessert table was declined. "The desserts will all be color-coordinated in blush and cream," Eleanor explained, as if speaking to a child. "And we're having a French croquembouche instead of a traditional cake." I didn't even know what a croquembouche was, but I nodded and smiled, determined not to cause problems. This was Olivia's day, not mine. The real trouble began at the bridal shower, hosted at the Thompson family estate 2 months before the wedding. Eleanor had arranged everything, from the champagne fountain to the elegant brunch menu to the guest list, which included 40 women I'd never met, most of them friends of Eleanor or Blake's 3 sisters. I felt out of place in my bright yellow dress among a sea of pastel linen shifts, but I was determined to enjoy celebrating my daughter. The mimosas helped, perhaps a little too much. By the time Olivia started opening gifts, I was on my 3rd glass and feeling more relaxed than I had in months. When she unwrapped my present, a handmade quilt featuring fabric from significant moments in her life, including a square from her first ballet costume and another from the t-shirt she wore on her first day of kindergarten, I saw tears fill her eyes. "Mom," she whispered, running her fingers over the colorful squares. "This is—" "Olivia has always been sentimental," I explained to the room, my voice perhaps a bit louder than necessary. "When she was little, she collected ticket stubs from every movie we ever saw together. She kept them in a special box under her bed, along with the fortune from every fortune cookie and the wrappers from her favorite candies." A few women smiled politely, but Eleanor's expression was frozen. Olivia's cheeks had flushed pink. "And she was the cutest little girl," I continued, buoyed by the mimosas and the rare moment of connection with my daughter. "When she was 4, she went through a phase where she would only wear her Cinderella dress, even to the grocery store. And she'd insist I call her Your Royal Highness. One time at Walmart, "Mom," Olivia cut me off, her voice tight. "Let's move on to the next gift, shall we?" I fell silent, suddenly aware of the awkward tension in the room. The moment passed. But later, as guests were leaving, Olivia pulled me aside. "Mom, I know you mean well, but could you please try to be a little more appropriate? This isn't Miller's Diner. These people are going to be my family." "I'm your family," I replied, hurt by the implication. "You know what I mean. Just, please try to fit in a little more." For me, I promised I would try. And I did try. I really did. For the rehearsal dinner the night before the wedding, I bought a simple navy dress. No patterns, no bright colors. I had my hair styled at the salon Eleanor recommended. I practiced a quieter laugh. I rehearsed small. Talk about neutral topics. The weather, the beautiful venue, how lovely Olivia looked. But then Blake's father, Douglas Thompson, stood up to give a toast. He spoke for 15 minutes about Blake's accomplishments, his Ivy League education, his promising career, his athletic prowess, without once mentioning Olivia. When he finally acknowledged her, it was to say, Blake's always had excellent taste, and he's certainly demonstrated that with his choice of bride. Something in me snapped. All the months of feeling sidelined, of watching my daughter being absorbed into this family that valued appearance over authenticity, of trying to shrink myself to fit into their world. It all came to a head. When Douglas finished his toast to polite applause, I stood up. I hadn't planned to speak, wasn't on the program, but I couldn't help myself. I'd like to say something too, I said, raising my glass. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to me. I saw Olivia's alarmed expression, but I was too far gone to stop. For those who don't know me, I'm Donna, Olivia's mother. And while I haven't had the privilege of sailing in Nantucket or summering in the Hamptons, there were a few uncomfortable chuckles. I have had the privilege of raising the most remarkable human being I've ever known. I turned to look directly at my daughter. Olivia, when you were 7 years old, you saved your allowance for 3 months to buy a Christmas present for Mrs. Jenkins next door because you overheard me saying she was spending the holiday alone. You bought her a teacup with painted violets because you noticed she had violets in her garden. Olivia's expression softened slightly, though she still looked nervous. When you were 12, you organized a book drive for the children's hospital where your friend Sarah was being treated for leukemia. You collected over 500 books. I saw a few women dabbing at their eyes now. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. And when you were 16, you spent every Saturday for a year tutoring kids at the community center, kids whose parents couldn't afford expensive SAT prep courses like many of your classmates had. I raised my glass higher. So yes, Blake has excellent taste. But what I hope he knows, what I hope all of you know, is that he's not just getting a beautiful bride. He's getting a woman with a heart so big and a spirit so generous that she's made everyone around her better just by being herself. I smiled at Blake. Take care of her. She's the best thing that ever happened to me, and she'll be the best thing that ever happens to you too, if you're lucky. There was a moment of silence, and then Blake stood up, tears in his eyes, and hugged me fiercely. Thank you, he whispered. I promise I will. The room erupted in applause. Several people came up afterward to tell me how moved they were by my words. Even a few of the Thompson relatives seemed to look at me differently, but not Eleanor, and not Olivia. What was that? Olivia hissed later, pulling me into an empty corridor. We had a program. Dad was going to give a toast, then Blake's best man, then we were going to cut the rehearsal cake. You weren't supposed to speak at all. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I just couldn't sit there and listen to Douglas talk about Blake like he was a prize stallion without saying something about you, about who you really are. That's not your job. This isn't about you or your feelings. It's about Blake and me and the life we're building, a life that includes his family and their traditions. And what about our traditions? I asked softly. What about the person you were before you met Blake? Before you decided that fitting into his world was more important than anything else? Her expression hardened. That's not fair. I haven't changed. I've grown up. Maybe you should try it sometime. Those words stung more than she could know. Before I could respond, she'd turned and walked away, back to the elegant rehearsal dinner with its program and its rehearsal cake, and its people who all seemed to know exactly what fork to use and when. The next morning, I woke early, determined to make things right. I texted Olivia, "I'm sorry about last night. Today is your day, and I promise to follow all the rules. Love you more than anything." I waited for a response, but none came. I tried calling, but it went straight to voicemail. As the hours ticked by and the 2 p.m. ceremony approached, I grew increasingly anxious. Finally, at 11:30, my phone buzzed with a text message. "Mom, after talking it over with Blake and considering what's best for everyone, we've decided it would be better if you didn't come to the wedding. Your behavior last night was embarrassing and inappropriate, and we want today to be perfect. I'm sorry, but this is our decision. I'll call you after the honeymoon." I read the message once, twice, 3 times, unable to process the words. Banned from my only daughter's wedding? For being embarrassing? For being myself? For standing up and speaking from the heart about the child I'd raised alone? I called immediately, but again it went to voicemail. I texted back, "Please, Olivia, I'll do whatever you want. I won't speak. I won't even smile if that's what you need. Please don't do this." No response. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, still in my pajamas, clutching my phone and fighting back tears. The beautiful mother-of-the-bride dress I'd finally found, a compromise between Eleanor's taste and mine, a subtle silver with just a touch of sparkle, hung in the closet, mocking me. What was I supposed to do now? Sit alone in this hotel room while my daughter got married without me? Drive the 4 hours back to Lakeside in disgrace? The humiliation was almost as painful as the rejection. Then, a strange clarity began to settle over me. If I wasn't welcome at Olivia's wedding, if being myself was so unacceptable that I had to be excluded from one of the most important days of my daughter's life, then what was I doing here at all? I got up, washed my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. I was still Donna Wilson. I was still the woman who had raised a daughter alone, who had worked 2 jobs to give that daughter every opportunity, who had taught that daughter to be kind and generous and true to herself. Even if that daughter had forgotten those lessons, I hadn't. And in that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. I didn't waste time dwelling on my pain. Instead, I packed my bags, checked out of the hotel, and headed to my car. But I wasn't going home to Lakeside to lick my wounds. No, I had a different destination in mind. For years, I'd been setting aside a little money each month for Olivia's wedding. As a single mom, I couldn't match what the Thompsons could contribute, but I'd managed to save almost $15,000. I had planned to surprise Olivia with it after the ceremony, a little nest egg to help the newlyweds start their life together. Now, sitting in my car in the hotel parking lot, I looked at my banking app and transferred the entire sum to my checking account. If Olivia didn't want me at her wedding, she certainly wouldn't want my money. And for the first time in my life, I was going to spend a significant amount of money on myself. I pulled out of the parking lot and headed west, away from Greenwich, away from the Thompson estate with its manicured lawns and perfectly arranged flower beds, away from the daughter who had decided I wasn't fit to witness her marriage. As I drove, I made a call to an old friend from high school, Marcy Reynolds, who now lived in New York City. Marcy and I had reconnected on Facebook a few years back. She'd left Lakeside right after graduation, moved to the city, and built a successful career as a talent agent. She was everything I wasn't: sophisticated, well-connected, and completely at ease in the urban jungle. But unlike Eleanor Thompson, Marcy had never made me feel less than for being exactly who I was. "Donna?" Marcy answered, surprised. "Aren't you supposed to be at Olivia's wedding right now?" "Change of plans," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Turns out I'm too embarrassed to attend my own daughter's wedding. Care to meet up with an old friend who suddenly finds herself with time and money to spare?" There was a brief silence on the other end. Then Marcy said, "Well, honey, their loss is my gain. How soon can you get to the city?" 3 hours later, I was sitting in Marcy's stylish apartment in Chelsea, a glass of red wine in my hand, pouring out the whole sordid story. Marcy listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from shock to outrage to determination. "So what now?" she asked when I'd finished. "What does Donna Wilson do with her newfound freedom and wedding fund?" I took a sip of wine and shrugged. "I honestly don't know. I've spent so many years being Olivia's mom, living for her, saving for her. I can barely remember who I was before all that." Marcy studied me over the rim of her glass. "Well, who did you want to be? Before life had other plans?" The question caught me off guard. Who had I wanted to be? I closed my eyes and thought back to a time before Richard left, before I became consumed with survival and single motherhood. I wanted to travel, I said slowly, opening my eyes. I wanted to see the world beyond Lakeside. I used to collect travel magazines, had a whole stack of them under my bed. I'd cut out pictures of places I wanted to visit and paste them in a notebook. "Where was top of the list?" Marcy asked. "Italy," I replied without hesitation. "The Amalfi Coast. All those colorful buildings stacked on the cliffs above the Mediterranean. I used to dream about sitting at a little cafe, drinking wine, watching the sunset over the sea." Marcy grinned. "So go." "What? Now? Why not now? What's stopping you?" I laughed. "I don't know. Everything. My job, my house, my—" I stopped, realizing that for perhaps the first time in decades, I had no immediate responsibilities tying me down. I'd taken 2 weeks off work for the wedding and to help Olivia settle into her new apartment afterward. My houseplants were being watered by my neighbor. My bills were on autopay. "Exactly," Marcy said, seeing the realization dawn on my face. "Nothing is stopping you." She reached for her laptop. "Let's see what flights to Naples look like for tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" I squeaked. "That's insane. I don't have a passport. I don't speak Italian. I don't—" "You have a passport," Marcy interrupted. "You got one 3 years ago when Olivia thought she might study abroad in France, remember? You told me you wanted to be able to visit her." She was right. I'd gotten my first passport at age 55, full of excitement about potentially seeing Paris with my daughter. The trip never materialized. Olivia chose an internship in Chicago instead, but the passport was still valid. And as for not speaking, Italian, Marcy continued. Half of Italy speaks English, and for the other half there's Google Translate. Come on, Donna. When was the last time you did something completely for yourself? I couldn't remember. And that, more than anything else, made up my mind. "Book the flight," I said, my heart racing with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. "I'm going to Italy." The next 24 hours were a blur. Marcy, efficient as always, booked me on a flight from JFK to Naples with a brief layover in Rome. She helped me shop for a few essentials: comfortable walking shoes, a universal power adapter, a crossbody bag for safety. She even called in a favor with a client who owned a small hotel in Positano, securing me a room with a balcony overlooking the sea. "It's the off-season," she explained. So Angelo was happy to help out. "The room isn't huge, but the view is spectacular, and you can walk to the beach in 5 minutes." As I packed my new purchases into my hastily rearranged suitcase, Marcy handed me a sleek smartphone. "It's an international phone," she explained. "I loaded it with apps you'll need: maps, translation, restaurant reviews. The data plan works throughout Europe, so you won't have to worry about crazy roaming charges. And I programmed my number on the speed dial, just in case." I was overwhelmed by her generosity. "Marcy, I can't accept all this. It's too much." She waved away my protest. "Consider it 25 years of missed birthday presents. Besides, I want updates. Daily photos of you living your best life on the Amalfi Coast." She grinned mischievously. "Preferably with a handsome Italian gentleman by your side." I laughed, but inside, my stomach was doing somersaults. Was I really doing this? Flying to Italy alone at 58, with no real plan beyond a hotel reservation? It seemed reckless, impulsive, everything I'd tried not to be as a responsible single mother. But then again, being responsible hadn't earned me a seat at my daughter's wedding. Perhaps it was time to try something new. The flight to Italy was long, and I barely slept. By the time I landed in Naples, collected my luggage and found the driver Marcy had arranged to take me to Positano, I was running on pure adrenaline. All fatigue vanished, however, the moment we rounded a bend in the coastal road and I caught my first glimpse of Positano. It was exactly as I'd imagined from those long-ago travel magazines, a cascade of pastel-colored buildings tumbling down the steep hillside to the impossibly blue Mediterranean below. The late afternoon sun bathed everything in a golden glow that made the scene look like a painting come to life. "Bellissima, no?" my driver said, noticing my awestruck expression. "Bellissima," I agreed, the first Italian word I'd ever spoken aloud. Hotel Miramare was a small family-run establishment perched about halfway up the hill. The lobby was cool and tiled, with potted lemon trees flanking the entrance and a reception desk made of dark, polished wood. Angelo, the owner, greeted me warmly, switching to perfect English when he realized I was American. "Any friend of Marcy is a friend of ours," he assured me, personally escorting me to my room on the 3rd floor. "You are visiting at the perfect time. Not too many tourists, but still warm enough to enjoy the beach." My room was simple but charming, with whitewashed walls, terracotta floor tiles, and blue ceramic accents that echoed the sea outside. And oh, that view! From my small balcony, I could see the entire sweep of the bay, with fishing boats bobbing in the harbor and the dome of the church catching the last rays of sunlight. I unpacked quickly, eager to explore before sunset. As I stepped out of the hotel, Angelo called after me, "Signora Wilson, will you join us for dinner? My wife Maria is cooking her famous seafood risotto tonight." The old Donna might have declined politely, not wanting to impose. But the new Donna, the one who had flown to Italy on a whim, smiled and said, "I'd love to, thank you." That first dinner set the tone for my entire stay. Angelo and Maria treated me not as a paying guest, but as a friend, seating me at their family table on the hotel's terrace. Their son Marco, home from university in Rome for the weekend, practiced his English with me while their daughter Sophia, a serious teenager with artistic ambitions, showed me sketches of the local scenery. The risotto was the most delicious thing I'd ever tasted, creamy and rich with the flavors of the sea. We drank local wine from simple glasses, watched the moon rise over the water, and talked late into the night. "So, Donna," Angelo asked eventually, "what brings an American lady to Positano alone in October? Most tourists come in summer, and usually with family or friends." I hesitated, unsure how much to share with these kind strangers. Then I decided that if I was going to truly embrace this adventure, I might as well embrace honesty too. "I was supposed to be at my daughter's wedding today," I said, taking a fortifying sip of wine. "But I wasn't welcome. So I decided to fulfill an old dream instead." There was a moment of shocked silence. Then Maria reached across the table and patted my hand. "Their loss," she said simply. "Our gain." The next morning, after a breakfast of espresso and fresh pastries on my balcony, I set out to explore Positano. I wandered the narrow, winding streets, ducking into small shops selling colorful ceramics, linen clothing, and locally made limoncello. I climbed countless steps, up to visit the Church of Santa Maria Assunta with its magnificent dome, down to the pebbly beach where a few brave souls were swimming despite the October chill. For lunch, I found a small restaurant overlooking the Dari beach and ordered seafood pasta, watching the waves while I ate. The waiter, a young man named Paolo, seemed charmed by my enthusiastic attempts at Italian and brought me a complimentary glass of Prosecco. "To new adventures," he toasted, clinking his water glass against my Prosecco. "To new adventures," I echoed, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the wine. By the third day, I had settled into a rhythm. Mornings were for exploration, a boat trip to nearby Capri, a bus ride to the lemon groves of Sorrento, a hike along the Path of the Gods, with its breathtaking views of the coastline. Afternoons were for relaxation, reading on the beach, napping on my balcony, shopping for small treasures to bring home. Evenings were for dining with my new Italian friends, who seemed determined to introduce me to every local delicacy and tradition. It was on the fourth day that I decided to document my journey. Using the smartphone Marcy had given me, I started taking photos not just of the scenery, but of myself enjoying it. Me sipping espresso at a cafe in the piazza. I learned to make pasta from Maria in the hotel kitchen. Me with my new tangerine sundress, purchased from a boutique in Positano, flowing in the sea breeze as I stood on a promontory overlooking the coast. That evening, on a whim, I posted a few of these photos on Facebook with the caption, "Instead of watching my daughter get married without me, I'm living my dream on the Amalfi Coast. Sometimes rejection is redirection. New beginnings." Italian adventure. I thought nothing more of it until I woke the next morning to find my phone buzzing with notifications. Hundreds of them. My post had gone viral overnight, shared by friends and then by strangers, accumulating thousands of likes and comments. Most of the comments were supportive. "You go, girl. Their loss. Turning lemons into limoncello. Love it." This is the definition of grace under pressure. Inspiration to us all. Some were from other mothers with similar stories. "My son didn't invite me to his wedding because his wife thought I was too country. Wish I'd had the courage to do something fabulous instead of crying at home. Banned from my daughter's wedding 3 years ago for refusing to dye my gray hair. Still hurts, but seeing your post helps. Maybe it's not too late for my own adventure." And a few were critical. There are two sides to every story. What did you do to get banned from the wedding? Attention seeking much? Maybe your daughter had a good reason. I was stunned by the response. I'd never considered myself social media savvy. I usually just posted occasional photos of my garden or shared recipes. The idea that thousands of strangers were now invested in my personal drama was both flattering and alarming. But the real shock came that afternoon when my regular phone, the one with my US number, rang. It was Marcy. "Donna, have you seen your notifications? You've gone viral, honey. I've gotten calls from 3 morning shows and a women's magazine, all wanting to interview you." "What? Why?" "Because you've struck a nerve. Your story resonates with people. The mother rejected for not fitting a certain mold, who chooses joy and adventure instead of victimhood. It's powerful stuff." I sat down heavily on my bed, trying to process this information. "I don't understand. I just posted a few vacation photos." "With the perfect caption," Marcy pointed out. "And perfect timing. There's been a whole conversation brewing online about toxic wedding culture and family estrangement. You've become the face of standing up for authenticity." "But I didn't mean to make some grand statement," I protested. "I was just living my life." "Exactly," Marcy said triumphantly. "That's what makes it so compelling. You weren't trying to prove a point or get revenge. You were simply choosing joy in the face of rejection. That's why people are responding." She paused, then added, "So what do you think? Are you up for an interview?" Good Morning America is very interesting. The old Donna would have demurred. Too much attention, too much exposure, too much potential for embarrassment. But the woman who had spent the past 4 days climbing coastal paths, chatting with locals in broken Italian, and posting swimsuit photos at 58, she had different ideas. "Tell them I'll do it," I heard myself say. "But not until I get back to the States. I'm not cutting my Italian adventure short for anything." Marcy laughed. "That's my girl. I'll set it up for next week." Then, more gently, "Have you heard from Olivia?" I felt a pang in my chest. No, I assume she's on her honeymoon by now. She's probably seen your post, or at least heard about it. Half the internet has. I hadn't considered that. The thought of Olivia seeing my Italian adventure, seeing me happy and thriving without her, brought a complicated mix of emotions. Part of me hoped it might make her reconsider her dismissal of me. Another part feared it would only confirm her belief that I was embarrassing and attention-seeking. I didn't do this to hurt her, I said quietly. I just couldn't sit in that hotel room feeling worthless. I know that, Marcy assured me, and anyone with half a brain who reads your story will know it too. After we hung up, I stood on my balcony watching the sunset paint the sea gold, then pink, then deepening blue. Something fundamental had shifted in me these past few days. The pain of Olivia's rejection was still there, a hollow ache beneath my ribs, but it no longer defined me. I was more than a rejected mother, more than an embarrassment to be hidden away. I was Donna Wilson, a woman with dreams and courage and friends in Italy, a woman whose story had somehow touched thousands of strangers, a woman who, at 58, was just beginning to discover who she really was. And in that moment, watching night fall over Positano, I made another decision that would change everything. Again. My second week in Italy unfolded like a dream. Armed with newfound confidence and the unexpected support of thousands of strangers online, I embraced every moment of my Amalfi adventure with open arms. Angelo and Maria became my unofficial Italian family, insisting I extend my stay at a special friend rate that I suspected was far below their normal pricing. Marco introduced me to his circle of friends, young professionals who treated me not as someone's mother, but as an interesting person in my own right. Sophia asked if she could sketch me for her art portfolio, positioning me on the terrace with the sea as a backdrop, my colorful sundress and silver hair catching the light in ways that made me look, to my surprise, rather striking. "You have a face that tells stories," Sophia explained when I expressed disbelief at how she'd captured me. "Most tourists here have the same face, excited but empty. You have depth." Coming from a serious 16-year-old who typically communicated in monosyllables, this felt like high praise indeed. The viral nature of my social media post added a surreal element to my daily explorations. Occasionally, someone would recognize me, usually American tourists who had seen my story shared online. "Aren't you the wedding mom?" a woman about my age asked as I browsed a ceramic shop in Ravello. When I nodded, somewhat embarrassed, she grabbed my hand and squeezed it. "My daughter did the same thing to me 3 years ago. I've been following your posts every day. You're living for all of us." I hadn't realized I'd been posting that regularly, but I suppose I had. Each morning, I'd share a photo or two from the previous day, along with brief reflections on what I was learning about Italy, about independence, about myself. Nothing profound, just honest observations about how it felt to navigate a world I'd only dreamed of for decades. What had begun as casual vacation photos had evolved into something of a travel diary, followed now by over 50,000 people. My previously quiet Facebook account buzzed constantly with notifications, likes, comments, shares, and direct messages from women, and some men, sharing their own stories of family estrangement, late-life adventures, and journeys of self-discovery. Tried to respond to as many as I could, particularly those from mothers in similar situations. Their pain was so familiar, their longing for reconciliation so raw. I couldn't offer solutions, but I could offer solidarity, and photos of breathtaking Italian vistas that served as visual reminders that life held possibilities beyond our heartbreaks. As my scheduled return to the States approached, Marcy called, with updates about the media interest. "Good Morning America is confirmed for next Monday," she reported. "They're sending a car to pick you up at your apartment at 5 a.m. I hope that's okay. The View wants you the following day, and People magazine is doing a feature for their next issue. They're sending a photographer to your place this weekend." I sat on my balcony, watching fishing boats return to the harbor as the sun began its descent, trying to wrap my mind around this new reality. 2 weeks ago, I'd been preparing to blend into the background at my daughter's wedding. Now, I was preparing to tell my story on national television. What if I'm not ready to go back? I said suddenly, surprising myself as much as Marcy. What do you mean? I mean, what if I stayed in Italy a little longer? There's so much I haven't seen. Yet Rome, Florence, Venice. I've barely scratched the surface. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Marcy said, "You're serious, aren't you?" "I think I am." The idea had been forming gradually over the past few days, but speaking it aloud made it suddenly, thrillingly real. I've never had this kind of freedom before. No one depending on me, no schedule to keep, no expectations to meet. Just me and my choices. What about your job? Your house? Valid questions. I'd been so caught up in the day-to-day magic of Italy that I hadn't thought about the practicalities of extending my stay. I could ask for a leave of absence, I said, thinking aloud. The school year just started and they could probably find a substitute for my position. As for the house, I owned my modest 3-bedroom outright, having paid off the mortgage 5 years earlier with the small inheritance from my mother. I could ask my neighbor Sarah to continue checking on it, maybe even see if she knows someone reliable who might want to rent it for a few months. A few months? Marcy sounded both impressed and concerned. Donna, are you talking about actually moving to Italy? Not permanently, I clarified, though the idea held a certain appeal. Just extending my adventure, seeing where it leads. And the interviews? The media opportunities? I considered this. Part of me, the part that still smarted from Olivia's rejection, liked the idea of telling my story publicly, perhaps reaching other women who felt erased by their families. But another part questioned whether I wanted to define myself primarily as a rejected mother. That identity felt increasingly distant from the woman I was becoming here in Italy. Could we postpone them? Or maybe do something remotely? I could film myself here, talking about my experience. I could practically hear Marcy shifting into agent mode. Actually, that might work even better. American mom rejected by daughter finds new life in Italy. It's got a great narrative arc. We could pitch it as an ongoing story rather than a one-off interview. Her enthusiasm made me laugh. So, you think I'm not completely crazy for considering this? Honey, the craziest thing you could do right now is go back to your old life as if none of this happened. You've started something here, not just for yourself, but for all those people following your journey. Don't cut it short just because it wasn't part of the original plan. That night, I sat down with Angelo and Maria to discuss the possibility of staying longer. To my delight, they not only encouraged the idea but offered a solution I hadn't considered. Our cousin Lucia has a small apartment in Florence, Angelo explained. She only uses it during the summer. The rest of the year, it sits empty. Perhaps you could rent it for a reasonable price? Florence is a good base for exploring Tuscany, and the train connections to Rome and Venice are excellent. You would not be alone, Maria added, clearly having picked up on my unspoken concern about leaving the support system I'd found in Positano. Lucia lives nearby, and her daughter Bianca is a tour guide who speaks perfect English. They would help you settle in. The next morning, I made 3 important calls. First, to my principal at Lakeside High School, requesting a sabbatical for the remainder of the school year. To my surprise and relief, he was understanding. You've never taken extended time off in 15 years, Donna. You've earned this. Just promise to send some photos for our Where in the World bulletin board. The students will get a kick out of seeing Ms. Wilson living La Dolce Vita. Next, I called my neighbor Sarah, who was thrilled at the prospect of managing my house in my absence. Her son Josh had recently graduated from college and was looking for affordable housing while he started his first job in Lakeside. He's responsible, doesn't party, and would treat your home with respect, Sarah assured me. And having someone actually living there would be better than leaving it empty for months. Finally, I called Marcy to confirm my decision. I'm staying, I told her, feeling a rush of exhilaration as I spoke the words. At least through the holidays, maybe longer. I'm going to explore Italy, learn the language for real, and see where this journey takes me. I knew it, Marcy crowed. Okay, here's what we'll do. I'll reschedule the TV appearances for after the new year. They'll still want your story, trust me. In the meantime, we'll set up some video interviews you can do remotely, and I'll talk to people about sending a photographer to Italy instead of New York. This could actually work out better for everyone. With those practical matters settled, I threw myself into preparing for the next phase of my adventure. Lucia's apartment in Florence was available, and at a monthly rate that would allow me to stretch my wedding fund for several months, especially if supplemented by the rent from Josh. Sophia helped me research Italian language courses in Florence. Marco and his friends created an itinerary of non-tourist sites I should visit throughout Tuscany. Maria packed a notebook with her favorite recipes, insisting that cooking would be the fastest way to improve my Italian. Food is the heart of Italy, she declared. Learn to cook like an Italian, and you will begin to think like one too. The evening before my departure for Florence, the Rossi family hosted a farewell dinner on the hotel terrace. Angelo invited Paolo from the beachside restaurant, who brought along his cousin Valentina, a photographer for a local magazine. Several of Marco's friends joined us, along with an elderly couple from the neighboring shop who had taken to greeting me each morning, with a warm, "Buongiorno, Donna," calls. As we feasted on seafood antipasti, homemade gnocchi, and Maria's legendary tiramisu, washed down with plenty of local wine, I looked around the table at these people who had welcomed me so completely. 2 weeks ago, they were strangers. Now they felt remarkably like family. "A toast," Angelo announced, raising his glass. "To Donna, who came to us by chance, but leaves as a friend. May your adventure continue with joy, and may you always know you have a home here in Positano." "To Donna," everyone echoed, glasses clinking. "And," Maria added with a wink, "to Olivia, who did not know what a treasure she was throwing away." There were murmurs of agreement and a few choice Italian phrases that I suspected were not entirely polite toward my daughter. I appreciated their loyalty, but felt a twinge of discomfort. "Olivia made a choice," I said carefully. "I don't agree with it, and yes, it hurt deeply, but she's still my daughter and I still love her. This journey isn't about punishing her. It's about discovering who I am beyond being her mother." Valentina, who had been quietly taking photos throughout the evening, looked up from her camera. "This is what makes your story so powerful," she said. "Forgiveness without surrender. Standing in your truth without diminishing others." Later, as the evening wound down and guests began departing with warm hugs and promises to stay in touch, Valentina approached me again. "I hope you don't mind that I took photos tonight," she said, showing me a few preview shots on her camera's display screen. The images were stunning, candid moments of laughter and conversation, the golden light of sunset adding a magical quality. "I'm preparing a piece for my magazine about foreigners who find a second home in Italy. Your story would make a perfect centerpiece." "Me?" I laughed. "I've barely been here for 2 weeks." "Time is not the measure," Valentina replied. "Connection is. You have embraced Italy, and Italy has embraced you back. This is rare and beautiful." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a notification. I glanced at it automatically, then froze. It was an email from Olivia. "Excuse me," I murmured to Valentina, stepping away from the group to read the message privately. "Mom," it began simply, "I've seen your posts. Everyone has. Blake's aunt in San Diego called to ask if the Amalfi Coast wedding mom was really my mother. It's surprising to see you like this. I don't know what to say except that I hope you're okay. We're back from our honeymoon now. The wedding was beautiful, perfect, just as we planned. I'll send photos when we get them. Oh, no apology, no acknowledgement of the pain she'd caused. Just a detached update, as if she were writing to a distant acquaintance rather than the mother she'd banned from her wedding. And yet, it was contact, the first since that devastating text message 2 weeks ago. I stared at the screen, unsure how to feel. Part of me had hoped for more, for recognition, for remorse, for some indication that Olivia understood what she'd done. Another part was simply relieved she'd reached out at all, breaking the silence between us. I typed and deleted several responses before settling on. Olivia, I'm glad to hear your wedding was beautiful. I never doubted it would be. Yes, I'm in. Italy, following a dream I've had since before you were born? I'm well. Better than well, actually. I've discovered parts of myself I'd forgotten existed. I hope married life is treating you kindly. I love you. Always. Mom. I hit send before I could overthink it, then rejoined the farewell dinner. As I slipped back into my seat, Angelo refilled my wine glass and Maria passed a plate of her homemade. Biscotti, everything okay? Maria asked, noticing my expression. My daughter emailed, I said simply. A look passed between the Italian couple. Concern, protectiveness, curiosity. And? Angelo prompted gently. And? She's back from her honeymoon. The wedding was perfect, apparently. I managed a small smile. Which is what she wanted. But not what you deserved, Maria said firmly. I shrugged. Maybe not, but I got something else instead. I gestured to the terrace, the sea beyond, the warm circle of new friends. Something I might never have found if things had gone according to plan. As the evening wound down and guests departed, I found myself alone on the terrace with Valentina, who was capturing the last light over the Mediterranean with her camera. The human heart is a strange thing, she said conversationally, not looking up from her viewfinder. It can break and expand at the same time. Is that an Italian saying? I asked. She smiled. No, just an observation. Your heart broke when your daughter rejected you, yes? But look how it has expanded since then. New friends, new experiences, new possibilities. The breaking created space for growth. I considered this. That's a beautiful way to look at it. Beauty from pain. This is life's greatest magic trick. She lowered her camera and faced me directly. So, what will you do if your daughter asks you to come home? The question caught me off guard. She won't, I said automatically. Then, more thoughtfully, at least not right away. She's still convinced she was right. But if she did? I looked out at the darkening sea, at the first stars appearing above the horizon, at the twinkling lights of the town cascading down to the shore. For the first time in my life, I was putting myself first, not out of selfishness, but out of self-respect. The woman who had boarded a plane to Italy on impulse, who had made friends in a foreign country, who had inspired thousands of strangers online, who was now preparing to live in Florence and study Italian, that woman deserved to complete her journey. If Olivia asked me to come home, I would tell her that I love her and always will, I said slowly. But I would also tell her that I'm not coming home yet, that I've started something important here, something I need to see through. Valentina nodded approvingly. Good. Remember that answer in the coming days. Why? Do you think she'll ask me to come back? I think fame changes things, Valentina said simply. And you, my friend, are becoming famous. I laughed at the absurdity of it. I'm just a middle-aged woman on vacation. No. Valentina shook her head firmly. You are a symbol now, of courage, of reinvention, of refusing to be erased. This carries power and responsibility. As I packed my bags that night, preparing for the next day's train journey to Florence, I pondered Valentina's words. I had never sought to become a symbol of anything. I'd simply made the best choice available in a painful situation. Yet somehow, that choice had resonated with thousands of people, had opened doors I never knew existed, had set me on a path I couldn't have imagined 2 weeks ago. The responsibility part was harder to grasp. What did I owe to all those strangers following my journey? What did I owe to Olivia, who had cast me out, but now seemed unsettled by my unexpected response to that rejection? What did I owe to myself, after decades of putting everyone else first? Didn't have clear answers yet. But as I folded my new Italian clothes, brighter, more stylish than anything in my closet back home, I made a promise to myself. This journey wouldn't be cut short by guilt or obligation. Whatever came next, whether reconciliation with Olivia, continued exploration of Italy, or something I couldn't yet envision, it would be my choice, made from a place of authenticity rather than fear. The woman who had left Greenwich in tears, banned from her daughter's wedding for being embarrassing, was gone. In her place stood someone new, or perhaps someone very old who had been waiting decades for the chance to emerge as I drifted off to sleep, lulled by the distant sound of waves against the shore. I wondered what adventures awaited in Florence, and what headlines might follow. Florence welcomed me with a different kind of beauty than the coastal splendor of Positano. Where the Amalfi Coast had dazzled with dramatic cliffs and azure waters, Florence captivated with centuries of art, architecture, and history layered within its compact city center. Lucia's apartment was a third-floor walk-up in the Oltrarno district, across the Arno River from the main tourist areas. The building dated back to the 1700s, with thick stone walls, tall windows, and terracotta floors worn smooth by generations of footsteps. The space was modest but charming, a combined living and dining area, a small but well-equipped kitchen, a bedroom with a wrought iron bed frame, and a bathroom that had been modernized just enough to provide comfort without losing character. 2E. Apartment's true glory was its tiny balcony, barely big enough for a cafe table and 2 chairs, but offering a view of terracotta rooftops punctuated by the dome of the Duomo in the distance. On my first morning, I sat there with a cup of strong Italian coffee, watching the city awaken as the rising sun gilded the ancient buildings. So this is home now, I murmured to myself, feeling a mixture of excitement and disbelief. At least, for a while. True to Angelo's word, Lucia and her daughter Bianca had been waiting to greet me upon my arrival. Lucia, a silver-haired woman in her 60s with Angelo's same warm smile, had shown me around the apartment, explaining the quirks of the ancient plumbing and the best settings for the temperamental gas stove. Bianca, a stylish woman in her 30s who had inherited her mother's warmth but paired it with a cosmopolitan efficiency, had provided me with maps, recommendations, and a business card for her tour company. Call me anytime, Bianca had insisted. Not just for tourist information, for anything. Florence can be overwhelming at first. Their kindness had eased my transition, but now, in the quiet morning hours, the magnitude of what I'd done began to sink in. I had moved to Italy. I was living in a centuries-old apartment in Florence. I was starting Italian language classes. Tomorrow. My old life in Lakeside seemed incredibly distant, as if it belonged to someone else entirely. My phone pinged with a notification, pulling me from my reverie. It was a direct message on Instagram, a platform I'd barely used before. In Italy, but had embraced as a more visual way to document my journey than Facebook. Ms. Wilson, this is Greta Phillips from Modern Maturity magazine. We'd love to feature you in our upcoming issue on women redefining midlife. Are you available for a video interview this week? Another media request, the 5th since Marcy, had started fielding inquiries. I'd already done a remote interview with a morning show in Chicago and provided quotes for a Washington Post article about family estrangement. The People magazine photographer was scheduled to meet me in Florence next week. I typed a polite response, referring Greta to Marcy for scheduling. Then I set my phone aside and returned to my coffee and the view. The media attention was flattering, but also somewhat disconcerting. I hadn't set out to become a public figure or a spokesperson for rejected mothers. I'd simply made a choice for my own well-being and shared it online. Yet I couldn't deny that my story had struck a chord. Every day brought messages from women, and some men, who saw themselves in my experience. People who had been excluded from family events, criticized for not fitting in, pressured to change fundamental aspects of themselves to gain acceptance. Many had accommodated these demands, shrinking themselves to please others. Others had pushed back and faced estrangement as a result. Very few had done what I did, turned rejection into an opportunity for growth. With this unexpected platform came a sense of responsibility that I was still learning to navigate. What message did I want to send? What did I hope people would take from my experience? These questions accompanied me as I set out to explore my new neighborhood. The Oltrarno district was known for its artisan workshops and authentic Florentine character, less touristy than the areas around the Duomo and Uffizi Gallery. I wandered narrow streets lined with small shops where craftspeople created everything from handmade paper to custom leather goods to intricate mosaics using techniques passed down through generations. I paused at a small jewelry workshop where a middle-aged woman was bent over a workbench, focusing intently on setting a stone into a silver setting. Something about her concentration reminded me of Olivia as a child, tongue between her teeth as she worked on a complex art project. The thought of my daughter sent a familiar pang through me. Despite our brief email exchange, the distance between us remained vast. I'd sent her one more message after arriving in Florence, sharing my new address and suggesting we might try a video call sometime. Her response had been non-committal. "Glad you're settling in. Things are busy here with work and the new house. We'll be in touch when things calm down." I tried not to read too much into her coolness. Olivia had never been demonstrative, even before our relationship became strained. And she was indeed starting a new chapter. New marriage, new home, new life. Perhaps she needed time to process everything, including my unexpected transformation from rejected mother to minor internet celebrity. As I continued exploring, I discovered a small cafe tucked away on a side street. "Cafe Leonora," read the discreet sign above the door. Inside, the space was cozy and inviting. Worn leather armchairs, bookshelves lining the walls, small marble-topped tables, and a polished wooden bar where an elderly man was carefully preparing an espresso. "Buongiorno," he greeted me with a smile. "Americana? Am I that obvious?" I laughed. "The curiosity in your eyes," he replied in accented but fluent English. "Tourists rush, looking but not seeing. You are looking and seeing different." He introduced himself as Franco, the owner, and recommended I try his specialty, a pistachio-infused cappuccino that he claimed had been written about in a Japanese travel magazine. That cappuccino marked the beginning of a daily ritual. Each morning, I would walk to Cafe Leonora for breakfast before my Italian language class. Franco would greet me by name, practicing Italian phrases with me as my skills slowly improved. Other regulars began to recognize me. Elisa, a university professor who occupied the same corner table each morning with a stack of papers to grade. Marco, a young architect who sketched building designs while sipping his espresso. Gabriella, a retired opera singer who occasionally burst into impromptu arias, her voice still remarkably powerful despite her advanced years. In my second week, Franco's granddaughter Chiara began working at the cafe. Unlike her grandfather, who had never left Florence, Chiara had studied in London and New York and spoke perfect English. She was in her late 20s, stylish and vivacious, with an infectious laugh and boundless curiosity. "Is it true?" she asked one morning as she served my cappuccino. "My friends say you're the American mother who was banned from her daughter's wedding and became famous on Instagram." I nearly choked on my drink. "I wouldn't say famous. 50,000 followers is famous in Florence, Chiara insisted. And your story, it's incredible. To reinvent yourself like this at your age. At my age? I repeated, raising an eyebrow. Chiara blushed. I didn't mean, it's just that my mother would never do something like this. None of my friends' mothers would. They're all so settled. I understood what she meant. Before Olivia's wedding, I had been settled too, comfortably ensconced in routines and responsibilities, viewing my own dreams as distant fantasies rather than achievable goals. It had taken a profound rejection to shake me out of that complacency. Sometimes we need a push, I told Chiara, though preferably not one as painful as mine. Our conversation marked the beginning of an unexpected friendship. Chiara was fascinated by my journey and eager to help me navigate Florentine life. She introduced me to her friends, recommended under-the-radar restaurants and shops, and even convinced me to join an expat book club that met monthly in the back room of an English-language bookstore near the Duomo. You need both Italian and American connections, she advised, to feel at home but also to have people who understand your background. She was right. The expat book club provided a welcome touch of familiarity. Conversations in English without the need to search for words, cultural references that didn't require explanation, shared experiences of navigating life in a foreign country. The members ranged from study-abroad students to retirees who had chosen Florence for their golden years, each with their own story of how they'd ended up in Italy. Through the book club, I met Harriet, a retired professor from Boston who had moved to Florence after her husband's death 5 years earlier. At 72, she was fearlessly navigating Italian life, riding a bicycle through the crowded streets, arguing with vendors at the market in rapid-fire Italian, and maintaining a busy social calendar that included opera, theater, and volunteer work at a local women's shelter. When Thomas died, everyone expected me to stay put, she told me over lunch one day. My children had this image of me as a grieving widow, tending his grave and living off memories. But that felt like dying alongside him. I needed to become someone new. Her words resonated deeply. I, too, was becoming someone new, not out of grief, but out of rejection. Yet the process felt similar, shedding an identity that no longer served me, discovering aspects of myself that had been dormant for years, building a life around my own desires rather than others' expectations. As weeks turned into months, Florence began to feel less like an extended vacation and more like a genuine home. My Italian improved enough for basic conversations with shopkeepers and neighbors. I established routines: morning cappuccino at Cafe Leonora, language classes 3 times a week, afternoon walks along the Arno, cooking experiments with ingredients from the local market. I also began fulfilling the media commitments Marcy had arranged. The People magazine photo shoot took place in various locations around Florence. Me on the Ponte Vecchio at sunrise, in the Boboli Gardens among centuries-old statues, cooking pasta in Lucia's apartment with the Duomo visible through the window. The photographer, Dennis, was professional but friendly, putting me at ease despite my discomfort with being the center of attention. "You're a natural," he insisted as I posed awkwardly on a bench in the Piazza della Signoria. "Most people tense up in front of the camera, but you have this genuine quality. It comes through in the photos." The remote television interviews were more challenging. Speaking to a camera in my apartment, unable to see the reactions of the anchors except through a slight delay on my laptop screen, felt artificial. But the response was overwhelmingly positive. Viewers connected with my story, particularly women in midlife who recognized themselves in my struggle to balance family obligations with personal fulfillment. My social media following continued to grow, surpassing 100,000 as the People article was published in late November with the headline, "Banned from her daughter's wedding, this mom found herself in Italy." The piece portrayed me sympathetically, but also raised questions about the events that had led to my exclusion from Olivia's wedding. While Wilson acknowledges that her relationship with her daughter had been strained for years, the article read, she remains vague about the specific behavior that led to her being asked not to attend the wedding. I've always been myself, she says. Perhaps too colorful, too loud, too different from what my daughter and her in-laws expected. But I don't believe in changing your essence to please others. Not anymore. The morning after the article was published online, I received a text message from Olivia. No greeting, just a link to the People story and a single line. So I'm the villain in your narrative now? My heart sank. I hadn't mentioned Olivia by name in any interviews and had been careful not to vilify her or the Thompsons. But I also hadn't hidden the pain of being excluded from her wedding or sugarcoated the experience to spare her feelings. I typed and deleted several responses before settling on, there are no villains in this story, Olivia. Just people making choices. You, with your wedding, me with what came after. I love you, and I hope someday we can talk about all of this face to face. No response came that day, or the next. I tried not to let her silence dampen my spirits or derail my growing contentment with my new life. But a mother's heart doesn't simply stop caring, no matter how deep the hurt. December arrived, bringing Christmas lights to Florence's historic center and a new dimension to my Italian adventure. The city transformed with holiday markets, elaborate nativity scenes in churches, and concerts of sacred music in venues ranging from grand cathedrals to tiny neighborhood chapels. Lucia insisted I join her family for Christmas Eve dinner, multi-course affair that lasted well past midnight and introduced me to traditional Tuscan holiday dishes. Bianca gave me a beautiful hand-tooled leather journal with my initials embossed on the cover. Franco and Chiara from the cafe presented me with a special blend of coffee beans, packaged in a tin with my name painted on it. These gestures of inclusion touched me deeply, especially as I faced my first Christmas without Olivia. She had sent a generic holiday card, season's greetings from Mr. and Mrs. Blake Thompson, with no personal note, no invitation to visit, no acknowledgement of the unusual circumstances that had led to our separation. On Christmas morning, I allowed myself a brief cry on the balcony of my apartment, watching the sunrise over Florence's historic skyline. Then I dried my tears, made coffee using Franco's special blend, and opened my laptop to record a holiday message for my social media followers. Buon Natale from Florence, I began, forcing a brightness into my voice that I didn't entirely feel. This isn't the Christmas I expected to have this year, but I'm learning that unexpected journeys often lead to the most meaningful destinations. I shared glimpses of Florentine holiday traditions, showed the small tree I'd decorated in my apartment, and displayed the gifts I'd received from my new friends. I ended with a message that came from the depths of my heart. To everyone spending this holiday missing someone, feeling excluded, or navigating painful family dynamics, you are not alone. Our worth isn't determined by others' ability to see it. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the courage to create joy even in difficult circumstances. I hadn't intended the message to be profound, but it resonated far beyond my expectations. Within hours, it had been viewed over 200,000 times. Comments poured in from people sharing their own holiday struggles and thanking me for putting words to their experiences. That afternoon, as I was preparing to join Harriet from the book club for Christmas dinner at her apartment, my phone rang, with a number I didn't recognize. Thinking it might be another media inquiry, I almost let it go to voicemail. At the last moment, I decided to answer. Donna Wilson? The voice was male, unfamiliar, with a distinct British accent. Yes, that's me. My name is James Whitaker. I'm a literary agent based in London. I hope you'll forgive the intrusion on Christmas Day, but I've just watched your holiday message and read the People article about your journey, and I believe there's a powerful book in your story. I sat down abruptly on the edge of my bed. A Book? Your experience speaks to universal themes: rejection, reinvention, finding courage in midlife. And you articulate these experiences with remarkable clarity and heart. I believe publishers would be very interested. I'm not a writer, I protested. But you are a storyteller, James countered. Your social media posts prove that. The writing, mechanics can be addressed with a good editor or even a co-writer if necessary. What matters is the story and the authentic voice behind it, and you have both. As I listened to James outline his vision for a memoir that would expand on the journey I'd been sharing online, a new possibility began to take shape in my mind. Not just a book, but a purpose. A way to transform my personal pain into something that might help others facing similar crossroads. I'd need to think about it, I said when he finally paused. This is all very unexpected. Of course, James agreed. Take the time you need, but consider this. Your story has already touched thousands of people through social media and brief news articles. Imagine what you could accomplish with a full-length book. After we ended the call, I sat on my balcony watching the Christmas lights twinkle across Florence, turning James's proposition over in my mind. Could I write a book? Did I have something valuable to share beyond the abbreviated version of my journey that had captured public attention? And most importantly, what would it mean for my relationship with Olivia, already strained by my increasing public profile? Would a book drive us further apart, or could it potentially open a path to understanding? These questions accompanied me as I made my way through Florence's holiday quiet streets to Harriet's apartment for Christmas dinner. I hadn't planned on mentioning the book offer, but over our second glass of wine, Harriet fixed me with her perceptive gaze and said, "Something's on your mind. Out with it." When I explained about James's call, her eyes lit up. "You absolutely must do this," she declared. "Not just for yourself, though God knows you've earned the right to tell your story, but for all the women who've spent their lives shrinking to accommodate others' comfort." "But Olivia, we'll have to deal with it," Harriet said firmly. "You've already bent over backwards to protect her image. At some point, you get to prioritize your truth." As midnight approached, and I walked back to my apartment through Florence's historic center, the Duomo illuminated against the night sky, I found myself thinking about the truth, Olivia's, mine, and the complex reality that lay somewhere in between. The woman I'd been with 6 months ago would have declined James's offer immediately, unwilling to risk further damage to my relationship with my daughter. But the woman I'd become in Italy? She recognized that some stories needed to be told, even when telling them came at a cost. I didn't have all the answers yet, but as I unlocked the door to my apartment, my home in this ancient, beautiful city, I knew one thing with certainty. The journey that had begun with rejection had led me to a crossroads where I finally had the courage to choose my own path forward. Whatever I decided about the book, that choice would be made on my own terms, not dictated by fear or others' expectations. And that, perhaps, was the most headline-worthy development of all. January in Florence brought crisp, clear days and a quieter rhythm to the city as the holiday tourists departed. With fewer crowds, I discovered a different side of Florence, the authentic daily life that pulsed beneath the Renaissance facades and world-famous museums. Each morning at Cafe Leonora, Franco would greet me with "Buongiorno, Donna," and a newspaper clipping about some obscure Florentine tradition he thought I should know about. Each afternoon, I would wander through a different neighborhood, sometimes with my camera, sometimes with my new leather journal, documenting my observations and impressions. My Italian had progressed from halting phrases to flowing conversations, though Chiara still corrected my grammar with affectionate exasperation. "You speak Italian like an American singing opera," she teased. "The passion is perfect, but the technique needs work." In the evenings, I alternated between quiet nights at home, cooking, reading, writing in my journal, and social engagements with my expanding circle of friends. Bianca had introduced me to a group of local artisans who met monthly for dinner at a family-run trattoria near the Arno. Harriet had pulled me into her volunteer work at the women's shelter, where my improving Italian and administrative skills proved unexpectedly useful. The expat book club had evolved into a close-knit community that gathered not just for literary discussions, but for museum visits, day trips to nearby towns, and impromptu potluck dinners. For someone who had been defined primarily as Olivia's mother for decades, this new identity as Donna, the American in Florence, felt both liberating and disorienting. People sought my company for who I was, not for my relationship to someone else. They valued my perspective, laughed at my jokes, asked for my opinions without filtering them through expectations based on a lifetime of history. Amidst this blossoming new life, James Whittaker's book proposal remained on my mind. After our Christmas Day conversation, he had followed up with a formal email outlining his vision for a memoir that would expand on my journey from wedding rejection to Italian reinvention. The timing, he argued, was perfect. My story had already captured public interest, and a book would allow me to delve deeper into themes that resonated with so many. I had shared the proposal with Marcy, who responded with characteristic enthusiasm. "This could open doors you haven't even considered," she said during our video call. "Speaking engagements, workshop opportunities, maybe even a documentary. Your story has touched a nerve, Donna. People are hungry for examples of women who refuse to be sidelined. That's not why I shared my journey online," I reminded her. "I wasn't trying to become a spokesperson for anything." "The best voices rarely are," Marcy countered. "They're just being authentic, and that authenticity resonates. Think about it. How many women have spent decades putting everyone else first, only to discover in midlife that they've lost touch with their own desires? You're showing them another way forward." Her words gave me pause. When I first posted those photos from Positano, I had no agenda beyond processing my own pain. But as my following grew, I'd begun to recognize the impact my choices were having on others. Women messaged me daily with their own stories of exclusion, diminishment, and the tentative steps they were taking toward reclaiming their voices. Men wrote about mothers, sisters, wives who had dimmed their light to accommodate others' comfort, and how my story had helped them understand the cost of that dimming. Could a book extend that impact? Provide a more nuanced exploration of the journey from rejection to reinvention? Offer hope to those standing at similar crossroads? These questions accompanied me on a brisk January morning as I walked along the Arno, watching the sunlight play across its surface. When my phone rang, I almost ignored it. I'd been trying to practice what Harriet called deliberate disconnection, setting aside time each day to be fully present in my surroundings without digital distractions. But something prompted me to check the screen. It was Olivia. My heart leaped as I answered. "Olivia, hi." "Hi, Mom." Her voice sounded tentative, almost formal. "Is this a good time to talk?" "Of course." I found a bench overlooking the river and sat down. "It's always a good time to hear from you. How are you? How's Blake?" "We're fine." A pause. "The house is coming together. The renovations took longer than expected, but we're finally settled." "That's wonderful. I'd love to see pictures sometime." Another pause. "Actually, that's partly why I'm calling. I've been thinking about things." My pulse quickened. Was this the opening I'd been hoping for? A chance to bridge the chasm that had formed between us? I waited, not wanting to rush her. "Blake's company is sending him to Milan for a conference in February," she continued. "It's a week-long event and spouses are invited. We thought, well, since we'll be in Italy anyway, maybe we could visit you in Florence for a few days afterward, if that works for you." The words I'd been longing to hear. My daughter wanted to see me. My daughter was reaching out, offering a chance to reconnect. I felt tears spring to my eyes as relief and joy washed through me. "I would love that," I managed to say. "More than anything." Good. Olivia's tone warmed slightly. It would be February 18th at 20. Is that okay? Perfect. I'll be here. I hesitated, then added, Thank you for suggesting this, Olivia. It means a lot to me. Well, we'll be in Italy anyway, she repeated, as if needing to justify the decision to herself. And Blake is curious about your situation there. I winced at her choice of words. My situation, as if my life in Florence were a temporary aberration rather than a deliberate choice. But I pushed past the hurt, focusing instead on the opportunity this visit presented. I'll make sure you both have a comfortable place to stay, I promised. Lucia's apartment has a pull-out sofa in the living room, but I could also look into a nearby hotel if you'd prefer. A hotel would be better, I think. Something nice, with room service. Of course. Olivia would never be comfortable in my modest apartment with its ancient plumbing and temperamental appliances. I understand. I'll ask Bianca, my landlady's daughter, to recommend something suitable. She works in tourism and knows all the best places. We spoke for a few more minutes, exchanging surface-level information about our respective lives. Olivia mentioned her job at the marketing firm, Blake's recent promotion, their plans to get a dog once the landscaping was complete. I shared edited highlights of my Italian life, language classes, neighborhood explorations, new friends. Neither of us mentioned the wedding, my growing public profile, or the tensions that had led to our estrangement. As we said goodbye, Olivia added, almost as an afterthought, Oh, and Mom? Could we keep this visit low-key? I don't really want to be part of your online presence. The request stung, but I understood her concern. Of course, sweetheart. This will be private, just family time. After we hung up, I sat by Arno for a long while, processing the conversation and its implications. My daughter was coming to Florence. My daughter was willing to see me, to stay in the same city, to spend time in my company. It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation, not yet, but it was an opening. I sent a quick message to Marcy. Olivia and Blake are coming to Florence in February. Need to hold off on book decisions until after their visit. Her response came quickly. Smart move. Take your time. The opportunity will still be there when you're ready. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into preparations for Olivia and Blake's visit. With Bianca's help, I secured reservations at a boutique hotel near the Ponte Vecchio, elegant and well-reviewed, with the room service Olivia had specified. I researched restaurants that would appeal to Blake's sophisticated palate while showcasing authentic Tuscan cuisine. I mapped out potential itineraries that would balance iconic sites with less touristy experiences. You're planning this like a military campaign, Harriet observed one afternoon as I pored over restaurant reviews in her apartment. They're not visiting dignitaries, Donna. They're family. I know, but I want everything to be perfect. I looked up from my notes. This might be my only chance to show Olivia that my life here has meaning, that I'm not just running away from rejection, but running toward something valuable. Harriet gave me a penetrating look. And you think perfect restaurant choices will convince her of that? I sighed. No, but it can't hurt. Olivia values a certain kind of experience. I want to meet her expectations. Even if those expectations require you to be something other than yourself? The question hit uncomfortably close to home. Wasn't that precisely what had led to our estrangement? Olivia's expectation that I would conform to her and the Thompsons' standards of behavior? My refusal to dim my light, to speak softly, to blend into the background? I'm not changing who I am, I said defensively. I'm just trying to find common ground. Harriet reached across the table and patted my hand. All I'm saying is, don't exhaust yourself trying to create a perfect Florence experience. Let the city work its magic, and let yourself be the Donna I know, warm, genuine, and unapologetically vibrant. If Olivia can't appreciate that woman, no amount of Michelin-starred dining will change her mind. As February 18th approached, my anxiety mounted. I found myself obsessively cleaning my already tidy apartment, though Olivia and Blake wouldn't be staying there. I bought new clothes for our outings, stylish but understated pieces that I hoped would meet with Olivia's approval. I practiced potential conversation topics in my head, carefully avoiding anything that might spark tension. "You're making yourself crazy," Kiara said bluntly when I confessed my preparations over coffee one morning. "This visit is supposed to be a good thing, yet you look like you're preparing for an execution." "I just want it to go well," I admitted. "There's so much at stake." "So much at stake, or so much to prove?" I blinked at her insight. "Both, I suppose." Kiara leaned forward. "Donna, in the months I've known you, I've watched you transform from a woman tiptoeing into a new life to someone who strides confidently through Florence, making friends, learning Italian, embracing adventures. You don't need your daughter's approval to validate that transformation." "I know that intellectually," I said slowly. "But emotionally, she's my only child, Kiara. The only family I have left." "Not true," Kiara countered. "You have a family here now, too. People who love you for exactly who you are, not who they want you to be." Her words stayed with me as February 18th arrived. I had arranged to meet Olivia and Blake at their hotel at noon, allowing them time to settle in after their train journey from Milan. I chose my outfit carefully, a cobalt blue dress I'd purchased from a local designer, paired with handcrafted leather boots and a silver necklace Franco had given me for my birthday in January. Professional but personal, stylish but distinctly me. As I approached the hotel, I spotted them immediately. Olivia in a camel coat and sleek ponytail, Blake in a navy blazer and designer sunglasses, both looking like they'd stepped from those pages of a luxury travel magazine. They were staring at their phones, not at the spectacular Renaissance architecture surrounding them. "Olivia! Blake!" I called, quickening my pace. My daughter looked up, her expression shifting from distraction to recognition to a careful smile. "Mom." We shared an awkward hug, brief, tentative, nothing like the enveloping embraces we'd once exchanged. Blake offered a warm handshake and a kiss on the cheek, seemingly genuinely pleased to see me. "You look wonderful, Donna," he said, and I was surprised by his sincerity. "Italy clearly agrees with you." "Thank you." I smiled at them both, trying to contain the riot of emotions swirling inside me. How was Milan? How was the train journey? "Milan was all business," Blake replied. "But the train was comfortable enough, though Olivia was worried about our luggage the whole time." "Italian trains aren't known for their reliability," Olivia said defensively. "Well, you're here now," I said brightly. "And I'm so happy to see you both. I have a reservation for lunch at a lovely place just a few minutes' walk from here, if you're hungry." The restaurant I'd chosen was a local favorite, elegant without being pretentious, with a menu that showcased traditional Tuscan dishes prepared with contemporary flair. As we were led to our table, the owner, Stefano, greeted me with the typical Italian warmth reserved for regulars. "Donna, so good to see you, and these must be your daughter and son-in-law from America." I'd mentioned Olivia and Blake's visit during my last dinner there, and Stefano had promised to give us special attention. True to his word, he seated us at the best table, overlooking a small courtyard where winter jasmine climbed stone walls. Beneath a canopy of string lights. "Your usual wine, Donna? Or perhaps something special to celebrate with my family?" "What would you recommend for a celebration, Stefano?" I asked, noting Olivia's surprised expression at this exchange. He suggested a special Brunello from a small producer near Montalcino, and Blake nodded approvingly at the choice. As Stefano departed to retrieve the wine, Olivia turned to me. "You have a usual wine? And the owner knows you by name?" "I come here often," I explained. "It's one of my favorite places in the neighborhood. Stefano's wife Lucia makes the best. Pappardelle with wild boar ragout in Florence." "I'm impressed, Mom," Blake said, glancing around the elegant space. You've really embedded yourself in local culture here. Most Americans never get beyond the tourist experience. His approval warmed me, though I noted that Olivia remained reserved, studying me as if trying to reconcile the mother she remembered with the woman sitting across from her. A woman on familiar terms with Florentine restaurant owners, confidently, ordering in Italian, at ease in her surroundings. As the wine arrived and we placed our orders, conversation flowed more naturally. Blake asked intelligent questions about Florentine history and culture, seeming genuinely interested in my responses. Olivia remained quiet, offering occasional comments, but mostly observing our interaction. "You seem different," she said suddenly, during a pause in the conversation. "Different how?" I asked carefully. She gestured vaguely. "Just different. More confident, maybe. Less embarrassing?" I supplied, unable to keep a hint of edge from my voice. Olivia flushed. I wasn't going to say that. An uncomfortable silence fell. Blake, sensing tension, smoothly changed the subject to their plans for the remainder of their Italian trip. The moment passed, but I felt its weight lingering between us. After lunch, I guided them on a walking tour of central Florence, showing them the Duomo, Piazza della Signoria, and Ponte Vecchio. As we strolled, I shared stories and historical details I'd learned from Bianca and my language instructor. Blake was an enthusiastic tourist, asking questions and taking photos. Olivia remained quiet, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. As the afternoon light began to fade, I suggested we stop at Cafe Leonora for a coffee before they returned to their hotel to rest before dinner. I wanted them to meet Franco and Chiara, to see this small but significant part of my daily life. The cafe was quiet when we arrived, just a few regulars occupying their usual spots. Franco greeted me with his customary warmth, his face lighting up when I introduced Olivia and Blake. "Ah, the famous daughter, and her husband. Come sit. Coffee is on the house today. We are celebrating family reunions." He bustled away to prepare our drinks while Chiara approached our table, wiping her hands on her apron. She hugged me briefly, then extended her hand to Olivia. "I've heard so much about you," she said warmly. "Your mother is very special to us." "Here?" Olivia shook her hand, looking slightly overwhelmed. "Thank you. It's interesting to see Mom's life here." "She has built something beautiful," Chiara said, with a pointed look at Olivia that made me want to sink into my chair. "From difficult beginnings, yes, but beautiful nonetheless." After Chiara and Franco moved away to serve other customers, Olivia turned to me with narrowed eyes. "You've told them about the wedding. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway." "They're my friends, Olivia. Of course I've shared parts of my life with them, including how I ended up in Italy. So they all know I'm the villain who banned my embarrassing mother from my wedding?" "That's not how I've described it," I said quietly, conscious of Blake's uncomfortable expression. "I've simply shared my experience as you would with friends who care about you." "Your experience has become quite public, hasn't it?" she said, her tone sharpening. "People magazine, morning shows, social media. I can't escape it. Friends, colleagues, even Blake's family. Everyone seems to have an opinion about me based on your story." So there it was, the real issue underlying her reserve. My growing public profile had exposed her decision to exclude me from her wedding to scrutiny she hadn't anticipated. "I never mentioned your name," I said carefully. "I've been deliberately vague about details that might identify you. But yes, I've shared my journey publicly because it resonated with people in ways I never expected. Did you consider how that might affect me, my career, my marriage? Having strangers judge me based on your one-sided account?" I felt a flash of anger. "Did you consider how banning me from your wedding might affect me, my dignity, my sense of worth?" I took a deep breath, trying to moderate my tone. "I'm not trying to punish you, Olivia. I'm trying to make meaning from pain, to create something positive from rejection." By making yourself into some kind of midlife influencer? Parlaying family drama into social media fame? Blake placed a hand on her arm. Liv, maybe we should— No, she cut him off. I want to understand. Because the mother I knew would never have sought this kind of attention. She would have been hurt, yes, but she would have handled it privately, not turned it into this. She gestured vaguely at our surroundings, at me, at everything my new life represented. The accusation stung, but beneath my hurt, I recognized the validity of her confusion. The mother she had known would indeed have retreated in private pain rather than embarked on a public reinvention. That version of me had prioritized Olivia's comfort over my own authenticity for decades. But that woman was gone, transformed by the very rejection Olivia had engineered. How could I help her understand that? You're right, I said finally, meeting her gaze directly. The mother you knew wouldn't have done this. But that mother spent years dimming her light to avoid making you uncomfortable. That mother measured her worth by your approval. That mother disappeared the day you decided she wasn't acceptable enough to witness your marriage. Tears pricked my eyes, but I continued. The woman sitting across from you now is both familiar and new. Still your mother, still someone who loves you more than life itself, but also someone who finally understands that she deserves to live fully, authentically, and unapologetically, even if that authenticity doesn't fit neatly into the box you've constructed for me. The cafe had gone quiet, the few patrons pretending not to listen while clearly absorbing every word. Franco and Chiara had retreated behind the counter, offering silent support with their presence. Olivia stared at me, her expression a complex mixture of anger, hurt, and something that might have been reluctant understanding. For a long moment, none of us spoke. Then Blake cleared his throat. I think your mother is amazing, he said, addressing Olivia but looking at me. What she's done here, creating a new life in a foreign country, learning the language, making friends, finding purpose. It's extraordinary. And honestly, Liv, I wish you could see that instead of focusing on how it affects your image. Olivia turned to him, clearly stunned by this unexpected alliance. You're taking her side? There shouldn't be sides, Blake said gently. She's your mother, the only one you'll ever have. And yes, the wedding situation was complicated, and yes, your feelings are valid too. But look at what she's built from that pain. Isn't that something to celebrate rather than condemn? A tear slipped down Olivia's cheek, and I resisted the urge to reach across and brush it away as I would have when she was a child. Instead, I waited, allowing her the space to process Blake's words, to find her own path forward. Finally, she looked up at me. I need some time, she said quietly. This is a lot to take in. I nodded, understanding flooding through me. Of course. Why don't you take the evening to rest? We can meet again tomorrow, or not, whatever you need. Relief crossed her face. Tomorrow? Maybe lunch? Lunch would be perfect. As they stood to leave, Blake leaned down and kissed my cheek. She'll come around, he whispered. She just needs to reconcile the mother she thought she knew with the woman you've become. After they departed, I remained at the table, emotionally drained but oddly hopeful. The confrontation had been painful but necessary, a clearing of the air that might, with time and patience, lead to a new and more honest relationship. Chiara brought me a glass of wine without being asked. You okay? I think so, I said, surprising myself with the realization that it was true. For the first time since this all began, I think I might actually be okay. I barely slept that night, replaying the confrontation with Olivia over and over in my mind. Had I said too much? Not enough? Would our lunch the next day bring reconciliation or deeper estrangement? Morning found me on my small balcony, watching the sun illuminate Florence's terracotta rooftops while nursing a cup of strong Italian coffee. The city had become my sanctuary, my place of reinvention. Yet seeing Olivia here, my past and present colliding, had unsettled me in ways I hadn't anticipated. My phone chimed with a text from Blake. "We're still on for lunch, requesting a more private setting. Olivia spent much of the night talking and thinking. Progress, I believe. I suggested a small trattoria tucked away in a quiet corner of the Old Trarno district, a place frequented by locals rather than tourists, where the owner, Gabriella, maintained a secluded garden room perfect for intimate conversations. When I arrived, Olivia and Blake were already seated in the garden, sunlight filtering through a canopy of winter jasmine overhead. Olivia looked tired but composed, her hands wrapped around a glass of water as if anchoring herself. "Good morning," I said, sliding into my seat with a deliberately casual tone. "Did you sleep well?" "Not really," Olivia admitted. "But it was necessary. Not sleeping, I mean. Thinking." I nodded, understanding. This isn't easy for any of us. Gabriella appeared with menus and a carafe of the house wine, greeting me warmly in Italian before discreetly withdrawing to give us privacy. The awkward silence stretched between us until Blake, ever the diplomat, suggested we order before attempting difficult conversations. Once Gabriella had taken our orders and departed, Olivia took a deep breath and met my gaze directly. "I need to say something," she began. "Last night, after we left the cafe, Blake and I talked for hours. Or rather, he talked, and I finally listened." She cast a grateful glance at her husband. "He helped me see things I've been avoiding." I waited, heart pounding as she gathered her thoughts. "Mom, I've been angry, not just about the social media attention or the articles, though that's part of it. I've been angry that you chose yourself over me." "Olivia, She held up her hand. "Please let me finish. All my life you were there, supporting my choices, adapting to my needs, being what I needed when I needed it. Even when I criticized you for being too loud or too colorful or too... You never stopped being there. And then, when I made this one request, this one crucial request about my wedding day, you didn't just comply. You completely transformed your life in response." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Do you know how that felt? To realize that all those years of accommodation had been a choice, not a necessity. That you were capable of this." She gestured around us, indicating Florence, my new life, all along, but chose to stay in Lakeside, in that small life, presumably for me? The perspective stunned me. I had never considered how my transformation might appear from Olivia's point of view, not as liberation, but as evidence of a lifetime of unnecessary sacrifice. "That wasn't why I stayed," I said gently. "I stayed in Lakeside because it was home, because I had a job I cared about, friends I valued. Yes, being close to you was part of it, but not the only part." "But look at you now," she countered. "You're thriving here. You've learned a language, made friends, created a whole new existence in just months. You're practically a different person." "Not different," I corrected. "Just more fully myself. The core hasn't changed, Olivia. I'm still the woman who raised you, who loves you beyond measure. I've just expanded the definition of who that woman can be." She absorbed this, fingers tracing patterns on the tablecloth. "Blake says I've been unfair, that I wanted to control your self-expression because it made me uncomfortable. That excluding you from the wedding was more about my image than about what you actually did." Blake reached for her hand, offering silent support. "I may have used the word shallow," he admitted, with a rueful smile in my direction. "It hurt," Olivia continued. "Watching the world embrace exactly the qualities in you that I've spent years being embarrassed by. Seeing strangers celebrate your authenticity while I rejected it." Her voice broke on the last words. Something shifted in my chest, a loosening of a knot I'd carried since that devastating text message 8 months ago. My daughter was acknowledging her role in our estrangement, not with a formal apology, but with something perhaps more valuable: honest recognition. We both made choices, I said carefully. You chose a wedding that matched your vision, even if that meant excluding me. I chose to transform that rejection into an opportunity, even if that meant creating a public narrative that reflected on you. Neither choice was malicious, but both had consequences we didn't fully anticipate. Our conversation paused as Gabriella delivered our meals: pappardelle with wild boar ragu for me, risotto with porcini mushrooms for Olivia, bistecca alla fiorentina for Blake. The rich aromas filled the space between us, a sensory reminder of the present moment grounding our difficult dialogue. As we began to eat, the atmosphere shifted subtly. Blake shared an amusing anecdote from their Milan trip. I offered insights about Florentine cuisine, and Olivia relaxed enough to ask genuine questions about my daily life. By the time we reached dessert, a shared plate of cantucci with vin, santo for dipping, something like normal conversation had been restored. Over coffee, Olivia hesitantly asked, "Have you decided about the book?" I blinked in surprise. "How did you know about that?" "Blake follows your literary agent on Twitter. He mentioned signing the Amalfi Coast wedding mom in a post last month. So much for keeping the offer private until after their visit." I haven't given him a definite answer yet. I wanted to see how our reunion went first. Because of me. It wasn't a question, because this story involves both of us, even though it would be told from my perspective. I wouldn't move forward if it would cause you more pain. Olivia studied me for a long moment. The old you would have already declined, wouldn't you? To protect my feelings? Probably, I admitted. And the new you? I considered the question carefully. The new me recognizes that my story might help others facing similar crossroads. But the new me also values our relationship enough to consider the impact on you. Write the book, Mom. The words were so unexpected that I nearly choked on my coffee. What? Write the book, she repeated, more firmly this time. Tell your story. The real story, not some sanitized version. I'll survive. Are you sure? She nodded slowly. I'm not saying I'll love every minute of it, but I'm starting to understand that your journey matters, not just to you, but to others who might need to hear it. And maybe there's a kind of redemption in being part of a story about growth and second chances, even if I don't come across as perfect. Blake squeezed her hand, pride evident in his expression. I felt my own surge of pride, not for my accomplishments, but for my daughter's capacity to evolve, to push beyond her initial reactions toward something more nuanced and generous. Thank you, I said simply, knowing the two words contained multitudes. We spent the remainder of the day together, exploring Florence with a new ease between us. Olivia still flinched occasionally when I laughed too loudly or engaged strangers in animated conversation. Old habits die hard, but she no longer tried to silence or constrain me. Progress, as Blake had said. Not perfection, but progress. When we parted that evening, our goodbye held none of the previous day's tension. Olivia hugged me properly, whispering, "I'm still processing everything, but I'm glad I came." "Me too," I whispered back. "More than you know." Blake embraced me next. "You've got a standing invitation to visit us in Connecticut," he said. "When you're ready. The guest room has a great view of the garden." "I'd like that," I replied, meaning it. "Maybe in the summer." As they walked away toward their hotel, I watched their retreating figures with a lightness in my chest that had been absent for months. The chasm between us hadn't closed completely, but a bridge was forming, fragile yet promising, spanning the distance between who we had been and who we were becoming. The following morning, I called James Whitaker and accepted his book offer. We spent an hour discussing the approach, timeline, and his vision for the project. He was thrilled by my decision and eager to begin, suggesting we schedule a series of interviews to capture the full arc of my journey. "The time feels right," I told him. "I've gained enough perspective to see both the pain and the beauty in this experience, and importantly, my daughter has given her blessing." "That's remarkable," James said. "Most family estrangement stories don't reach that kind of resolution within a year." "It's not a resolution exactly," I clarified. "More like evolution. We're both learning to see each other as complete people, not just as roles we're expected to play." After our call, I went to Café Leonora to share the news with Franco and Chiara. They insisted on opening a bottle of Prosecco despite the early hour to celebrate what Franco called my new chapter in an already remarkable story. "First you conquer Italy, now you conquer publishing," Chiara toasted, raising her glass. "What's next? American movie stars?" I laughed. "Let's not get carried away. I'm just telling my story, not auditioning for Hollywood." "Never say never," Franco winked. "I have already practiced my acceptance speech for when they make a movie and cast me as a handsome Italian cafe owner." His antics drew laughter from the morning customers, several of whom had become friends over the months. As I looked around, at these faces, once strangers, now fixtures in my daily life, I marveled at how completely my existence had transformed in less than a year. Working with James proved both challenging and cathartic. Over the next several months, we developed a routine, 2 hours of recorded interviews each week, followed by his drafting chapters that I would then review and refine. The process forced me to examine every aspect of my journey, from the years of subtle diminishment preceding Olivia's wedding, to the exhilarating terror of my impulsive flight to Italy, to the gradual awakening I'd experienced in my new home. "The key is balance," James advised during one of our sessions. "We want readers to understand the pain that catalyzed your journey without casting Olivia as a villain. And we want to celebrate your transformation without suggesting that everyone should abandon their responsibilities and move to Italy. Though that does have a certain appeal," I joked. The book took shape gradually, its narrative expanding beyond my personal story to explore broader themes: the societal pressure on women to accommodate others' comfort, the challenge of maintaining authenticity within family systems, the possibility of reinvention at any age. Meanwhile, my life in Florence continued to evolve. My Italian improved enough that I began volunteering as a conversation partner for local university students studying English. Harriet convinced me to join her in a watercolor class, where my initial awkward attempts gradually improved until I was producing small paintings worthy of being framed, several of which now hung in my apartment. My social media following continued to grow, though I posted less frequently as I channeled more of my energy into the book. When I did share updates, they focused increasingly on my daily life in Florence rather than reflections on the past, a shift that felt both natural and necessary as I moved forward. In April, Lucia offered to extend my lease for another year, at the same favorable rate. "You belong here now," she said simply, when I expressed surprise at her generosity. "Florence has claimed you." The sense of belonging she articulated had grown stronger with each passing month. I no longer felt like a tourist or even an expat, but like someone who had found her rightful place in the world, a place that embraced rather than constrained her authentic self. In May, I received an unexpected email from Eleanor Thompson, Blake's mother. The subject line read simply, "Apology." "Dear Donna," she began, "Blake has shared with me some of the conversations he and Olivia had with you in Florence. While Olivia may still be working through her feelings, I find myself compelled to acknowledge my role in what happened before the wedding. My insistence on a certain type of event, my dismissal of your contributions, my implicit and explicit pressure on Olivia to conform to Thompson family expectations, all of these contributed to the painful situation that unfolded. For that, I am truly sorry. The apology continued, expressing admiration for my resilience and suggesting that perhaps, in time, we might find a way to establish a more respectful relationship. It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation, but it was something I'd never expected. Recognition from the very person who had seemed most determined to erase me from Olivia's wedding. I shared the email with Marcy during our weekly video call, still processing my mixed emotions about it. People surprise you, she observed. Sometimes in terrible ways, sometimes in wonderful ones. The trick is staying open to both possibilities. Wise words from a talent agent, I teased. Hey, I negotiate human relationships for a living, she shot back. Speaking of which, you should know that the publisher is thrilled with the early chapters James has submitted. They're talking about a significant marketing campaign for the launch next spring, including a multi-city book tour. A book tour? I echoed, the reality of publication suddenly becoming concrete. Back in the States? That's generally where English language books sell best, yes, Marcy grinned, though we could certainly include Italy in the itinerary. The prospect of returning to America, not just to visit Olivia and Blake, but as an author promoting a published memoir, felt surreal. When I'd fled to Italy after being banned from the wedding, I'd had no concrete vision of the future beyond, escaping my immediate pain. Now that future was taking shape in ways I could never have imagined. By summer, the manuscript was nearly complete, and my relationship with Olivia had continued its cautious healing through regular video calls and text exchanges. In July, I made good on my promise to visit them in Connecticut, my first return to American soil in almost a year. The visit went surprisingly well. Their home was exactly as I'd expected, elegant, tastefully decorated, immaculate. But Olivia seemed less concerned about my potential to disrupt its perfection than she once would have been. When I laughed too loudly at dinner or struck up conversations with strangers during our outings, she watched with a mixture of familiar embarrassment and newfound acceptance. On my last evening there, as we sat on their patio watching fireflies emerge in the gathering dusk, Olivia said quietly, I found my old vision board last week, the one I made for my wedding when I was 13. I remember it, I smiled. Every detail planned, right down to the color of the napkins. What I'd forgotten was that you were in those plans. She swirled the wine in her glass, not meeting my eyes. I had a picture of a mother-daughter dance, magazine cutouts of mother of the bride dresses. You were supposed to be part of it all. What changed? I asked gently. She considered this. I changed, or rather, my image of the perfect wedding changed. It became less about celebration and more about presentation. Less about love, and more about meeting certain standards. She glanced at me. Standards that, looking back, were never really mine to begin with. The admission hung between us, not quite an apology, but something equally valuable. Recognition of how external expectations had warped what should have been a joyful milestone into a source of division. If I could do it over, she began, then stopped herself. No, that's not right. We can't do it over, but we can do better going forward. Yes, I agreed. We can. When I returned to Florence, I brought with me a renewed appreciation for the journey that had led me there. The pain of rejection had opened a door to possibilities I might never have explored otherwise. The very public sharing of my experience had connected me with thousands of people navigating their own crossroads. And most surprisingly, the distance, both geographical and emotional, had created space for a different kind of relationship with my daughter to emerge. As the summer heat gave way to the golden light of Tuscan autumn, I completed the final chapter of my memoir. James had suggested we end with reflection rather than resolution, acknowledging that life's most meaningful journeys are rarely finished, but constantly evolving. I sat on my small balcony, watching the sunset paint Florence's skyline in hues of amber and rose, and wrote the closing paragraphs. People often ask if I regret being banned from my daughter's wedding. The honest answer is both yes and no. Yes, because missing that day will always carry a certain sadness. No, because without that painful rejection, I might never have found the courage to reclaim the vibrant, authentic self I had gradually surrendered over decades of accommodation. The headlines that followed my impulsive flight to Italy framed my story as one of dramatic transformation, the embarrassing mother who reinvented herself after being excluded from her daughter's perfect day. But the truth, as always, is more nuanced. I didn't become someone new on the Amalfi Coast or in the streets of Florence. I simply remembered who I had always been beneath the layers of compromise and constraint. The mother who was banned from the wedding and the woman who found herself in Italy are not separate people but parts of the same whole. A woman who finally understood that her light was never meant to be dimmed, that her laugh was never meant to be muffled, that her spirit was never meant to be contained. And perhaps that is the most important headline of all. That authenticity, once reclaimed, changes everything. Not just for ourselves, but for all those brave enough to witness it. I saved the document and sent it to James with a simple note. It's finished. Then I closed my laptop, picked up my phone, and took a photo of the sunset from my balcony. I posted it to Instagram with the caption, "Some journeys begin with rejection and end with reclamation. Grateful for this one. Authenticity wins." Within minutes, among the flood of likes and comments, a notification appeared that made me smile through sudden tears. "Olivia, Thompson liked your post. Small steps, imperfect progress, a bridge still under construction. But for now, for today, it was enough." Spring in Florence arrived with an explosion of color, wisteria cascading over ancient walls, potted geraniums brightening windowsills, market stalls overflowing with seasonal blooms. As the city awakened from winter, so too did my life enter a new season of possibilities. My memoir, titled Uninvited: How Being Banned from My Daughter's Wedding Led Me to Find Myself, was scheduled for release in September. The advance copies had already generated buzz among early reviewers, with publishers weekly calling it a candid and ultimately uplifting exploration of midlife reinvention sparked by familial rejection. Marcy had organized a 10-city book tour across America, culminating in a special event in Florence that would be live-streamed globally. "From rejection to bestseller lists," she joked during one of our planning calls. "Talk about the ultimate revenge story." "It's not about revenge," I reminded her. "It never was." "I know," she softened. "That's what makes it powerful. You transformed pain into purpose without weaponizing it. That's rare." My relationship with Olivia continued its gradual healing. Our video calls had become weekly rituals rather than occasional obligations. Sometimes Blake would join, other times it would be just the two of us, slowly rebuilding a connection that was neither the strained relationship of our past nor something entirely new, but a thoughtful blend of history and growth. During one such call in late April, Olivia surprised me with unexpected news. "I've been asked to speak at a women's leadership conference in Rome this July," she said, a hint of pride in her voice. "A panel on marketing strategies for luxury brands in European markets." "That's wonderful," I replied, genuinely pleased for her. "Your first international speaking engagement." "It is," she agreed. Then, more hesitantly, "I was thinking, Blake can't get away from work that week, but maybe you could meet me there. We could spend a few days in Rome together afterward." The invitation, so casually offered yet so significant, left me momentarily speechless. "I'd love that," I finally managed. I've only visited Rome briefly. It would be wonderful to explore it with you. Something eased in her expression. Good. I'll send you the dates. The prospect of traveling with Olivia, of sharing new experiences rather than navigating old tensions, filled me with quiet joy. It represented progress I had scarcely dared hope for a year ago. Meanwhile, life in Florence continued to evolve in unexpected ways. Franco, inspired by the popularity of my story, had added an American corner to Café Leonora, featuring books by expatriate authors and photographs of Florence taken by American residents. My watercolor of the Arno at sunset held a place of honor on the wall, alongside works by more accomplished artists. You bring customers, Franco explained with a wink when I protested this undeserved prominence. Everyone wants to meet the famous Donna who will soon have book in Barnes & Noble. My Italian had improved enough that I'd begun assisting Bianca with occasional English-speaking tour groups, offering the perspective of an American who had embraced Florentine life. These tours had led to an unexpected side opportunity. A local publisher had approached me about creating a guidebook specifically for women traveling alone to Tuscany. Not typical tourist book, the editor explained in charmingly accented English, but advice from someone who made this journey herself. Secret places, how to make friends, how to feel safe but adventurous. I'd agreed enthusiastically, seeing it as a perfect complement to my memoir. One told the emotional journey, the other would provide practical guidance for those inspired to undertake similar adventures. In June, I received a peculiar email from Richard, Olivia's father, who had largely disappeared from our lives after our divorce when Olivia was 4. He had apparently seen an article about my upcoming book and wanted to reconnect. I've been following your story online, he wrote. It's remarkable what you've accomplished. I always knew you had that spark in you, even back when we were young. Would love to catch up sometime. I stared at the message for a long time, memories flooding back, some bitter, some sweet, all part of the tapestry that had led me to this moment. After careful consideration, I replied with polite but firm boundaries, making it clear that while I wished him well, I wasn't interested in rekindling a relationship that had caused so much pain. The old Donna might have agreed to meet, out of a sense of obligation or a need for closure. The woman I'd become recognized that some doors were better left closed, that moving forward didn't require revisiting every chapter of the past. When I mentioned Richard's email to Harriet during our weekly watercolor class, she nodded approvingly at my response. That's the thing about transformation, she said, mixing the perfect shade of terracotta for her Tuscan landscape. You don't just change how you move forward, you change how you relate to your past. July arrived, bringing with it the anticipation of my trip to Rome with Olivia. I packed lightly, a skill I'd perfected during weekend explorations of Tuscan hill towns, and boarded the high-speed train with a mixture of excitement and nervous energy. Rome greeted me with its characteristic sensory overload, the roar of Vespas navigating chaotic traffic, the scent of espresso and fresh bread wafting from corner cafes, the visual feast of ancient ruins standing proudly amidst modern urban life. Olivia's conference was being held at a luxury hotel near the Spanish Steps. She had arranged for me to attend her panel discussion, where she spoke with confidence and authority about global branding strategies. Watching her command the room, I felt a surge of maternal pride untainted by the old anxieties about fitting in or meeting expectations. When she finished, receiving warm applause from the audience, our eyes met across the room. She smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that reached her eyes, and in that moment, I knew we would be okay. The next 3 days unfolded with a natural ease I hadn't dared anticipate. We visited the Colosseum and Roman Forum, tossed coins into the Trevi Fountain, wandered the galleries of the Vatican museums, and enjoyed long dinners at neighborhood trattorias, where Olivia seemed impressed rather than embarrassed by my ability to converse with servers in Italian. On our final evening, Sitting at a rooftop restaurant with the dome of St. Peter's Basilica illuminated against the night sky, Olivia reached across the table and took my hand. "I've been thinking about what to write in your book," she said. "My book?" I echoed, confused. "For the dedication. You're going to ask me to write something, aren't you?" The possibility hadn't occurred to me. The memoir was already complete. The dedication a simple, "For Olivia, always," that acknowledged our connection without presuming her endorsement. "Would you want to?" I asked carefully. She nodded. "I think it's important. For both of us." She paused, collecting her thoughts. "This story isn't just yours, even though you're the one who lived it most directly. It's about both of us, about patterns and expectations and the courage to break them." I felt tears prick my eyes. "That means more than you know." "I've learned something this year," she continued. "Watching you rebuild your life, seeing how you flourished by simply being authentic, it's made me question my own choices, the compromises I've made, the parts of myself I've pushed aside to fit someone else's vision." "We all make compromises," I said gently. "That's part of life." "Yes, but there's a difference between compromise and surrender. I think I surrendered too much, for too long." She squeezed my hand. "You taught me that by refusing to surrender anymore." On our last morning in Rome, before Olivia headed to the airport for her flight back to Connecticut, and I boarded the train to Florence, we shared a final coffee at a small cafe near our hotel. The sky was the perfect blue that graces Italian summers, the air already warm with the promise of midday heat. "I've been thinking about coming to your book launch in Florence," Olivia said casually, stirring sugar into her espresso. "Blake thinks he can get away from work that week." Joy bubbled up inside me. "Really? You'd want to be there?" "Of course." She looked surprised at my reaction. "It's a big moment. I should be there." As we embraced goodbye outside the cafe, I felt the full circle of our journey, from the devastating text message that had banned me from her wedding to this moment of reconciliation and mutual respect. Not perfect, not without lingering sensitivities, but real and hopeful. Back in Florence, I found a package waiting at Lucia's apartment, advance copies of my memoir, sent by the publisher. The cover featured a striking image, a woman, photographed. From behind, face not visible, standing on a terrace overlooking the Amalfi Coast, her arms outstretched in a gesture of freedom and embracement. I ran my fingers over the embossed title, hardly believing that the painful moment that had initiated this journey had transformed into something so meaningful, not just for me, but potentially for thousands of readers facing their own crossroads. That evening, I gathered with my Florence family, Franco and Chiara, Lucia and Bianca, Harriet and others from the expat community, for an impromptu celebration at Cafe Leonora. As glasses of Prosecco were distributed and toasts offered in a mixture of Italian and English, I found myself filled with profound gratitude. The mother who had been banned from her daughter's wedding for being embarrassing had not disappeared in shame or bitterness. Instead, she had embarked on an adventure that had led to authentic joy, meaningful work, true friendship, and a pathway back to her daughter, this time on equal, honest terms. As Franco raised his glass for a final toast, he offered words that captured the essence of my journey. To Donna, who reminds us all that sometimes the door that closes behind you is not an ending, but an invitation to find the windows waiting to be opened ahead. I smiled, thinking of the dedication page that would appear in my published memoir in just a few months. For Olivia, who taught me that love perseveres even when expectations don't. And for all those seeking the courage to be authentically themselves, remember, your light was never meant to be dimmed. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.